You're done. Pack your things and get out of my restaurant. Clara didn't move. She stood in that office still holding the smell of kitchen smoke in her hair and stared at the man who had just ended her life over a bowl of soup. 6 years. 6 years of double shifts, of swallowed pride, of smiling at people who never learned her name, and it ended tonight because she fed a freezing woman on the sidewalk. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman she'd helped wasn't just any stranger. And the man coming from Marcus Hale wasn't the forgiving kind. Subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. You're done. 2 words. That was all Marcus Hale needed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the desk. He simply set down his pen, looked at Clara Mendez across 6 years of her life, and said it like he was reading a number off a receipt. Pack your things and get them out of my restaurant. Clara didn't move right away. She was still in her apron. There was still a coffee ring on her left sleeve from table 9, still a burn mark on her right wrist from the oven rack at 7:15 that evening. She had $40 in her wallet, a daughter in college, and a studio apartment that cost more every single month than the month before it. And Marcus Hale had just ended all of it in 2 words because she had fed a freezing woman a bowl of soup. You're serious, Clara said. Not a question, a statement. The kind you make when you already know the answer and you're just trying to make your brain catch up to your ears. Completely, Marcus said. She looked at his face, really looked the way you look at something when you were deciding whether to remember it, and what she saw wasn't anger. It wasn't even indifference. It was something worse. It was convenience. She was a problem that had presented itself at an inconvenient moment, and he was solving it. Her hands were wrapped in plastic, Clara said quietly. She was standing in 40-degree wind with her hands wrapped in plastic bag, Marcus. And that is deeply unfortunate, he said, folding his hands on the desk with a patience that made her stomach turn. But it is not the concern of this restaurant. You used my inventory, you disrupted the atmosphere of an active dinner service, and you made that decision without authorization. That is what this is about. It was bread, it was soup. It was a choice you weren't entitled to make. Clara felt something shift inside her. Not break shift, the way a foundation shifts right before it gives. 6 years, she said. I'm aware, Mom. 6 years, and you've never once. 2 weeks severance, he said, cutting her off with the smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed this. I'll have it processed by Friday. You can leave your apron with the host stand. He picked up his pen. He actually picked up his pen and went back to whatever he'd been doing before she walked in, like she was already gone, like she was already a closed file, like 6 years of her standing on sore feet in his kitchen were nothing more than a line item being removed from a budget. Clara untied her apron. She folded it, slowly. She didn't know why she folded it, some reflex of dignity, maybe some instinct that said, do not let him see you crumple. She laid it on the edge of his desk. She walked out. The cold outside was a physical thing. It pushed against her the moment she stepped through the door, and for a second she just stood on the sidewalk, not moving, letting it hit her face because it was real and immediate, and she needed something real right now. The spot where the woman had been standing was empty, just a stretch of dark sidewalk, a crushed coffee cup near the gutter, the faint outline of where someone had stood for a long time and then disappeared. Mara. That's what the woman had said her name was. Clara had given her bread and soup and her own name and the promise of tomorrow. She had meant every word of it, and now she was standing outside the restaurant where she'd spent 6 years holding nothing but a phone and an empty apron hook's worth of habit at staring at a sidewalk where a stranger used to be. She called her daughter. Destiny picked up on the second ring. She always did. Mom, you're out early. Everything okay? Clara opened her mouth. And for just a second, she couldn't speak. Because the truth was sitting right at the front of her throat, and it was bigger than she'd expected, and she was standing alone on a cold street, and her daughter was 200 miles away in a dormitory, and I lost my job tonight, she said. Silence. What? Marcus fired me? Mom. Destiny's voice did the thing it did when she was frightened, and trying not to show it. It got very careful, very precise. What happened? Did someone complain? Was there an incident in the dining room? I gave food to a woman who was cold. Longer silence this time. He fired you for that. He fired me for that. She heard her daughter exhale, long and slow, the kind of exhale that's really a person reorganizing their internal landscape. Okay, Destiny said finally. Okay, Mom, it's going to be okay. Do you have enough for rent? For now. Don't stress about my tuition. Stop, Clara said gently. Don't you dare do that. Your school is not the thing we're discussing right now. But Mom, Destiny. A beat, okay? Destiny said quietly. Okay, I love you. I love you too, baby. Get some sleep. She hung up and stood there another moment, the phone warm in her cold hand, the city moving around her in its total indifference. Then she walked to the bus stop, sat down, and began figuring out how to survive. The next 5 days were the particular kind of exhausting that isn't about physical labor. It's the exhaustion of waiting, of refreshing your email every 20 minutes, of performing confidence in cover letters while the voice in the back of your head says nobody's calling, nobody's going to call. She applied to 14 restaurants, 3 catering operations, a hotel dining room that would have been a step down, but she wasn't thinking about steps anymore. She was thinking about the rent check due in 18 days. Not one callback. On the 5th day, Donna called. Donna was a line cook at Rosario's, had been there longer than Clara, and was one of those people whose loyalty was like iron quiet, unpretty, impossible to bend. I need to tell you something, Donna said with no greeting, and I need you to not spiral when I tell you. Tell me. Marcus is talking. Clara set down her coffee cup very slowly. Define talking. Saying you were terminated for conduct issues, not specifying what kind, just conduct issues. The vague kind that sounds worse than anything specific. A pause. 2 of the places you applied, I think he got to them first. Called when they called him for a reference. The word came to her before she consciously reached for it. He's blacklisting me. Clara. Say it, Donna. Yeah, I think so. After she hung up, Clara sat at her kitchen table for a long time without moving. This was it then, the full shape of it. She'd given a freezing woman something to eat. She'd been fired for it. And now the man who'd fired her was using the phone and the small power of his name to quietly seal every door she tried to walk through. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so crushingly ordinary. This was how it always worked. Not with drama, not with confrontation, with small, clean, procedural decisions made by a man who would never lose a night of sleep over any of it. She got up. She made herself eat something. She sat back down at the laptop and kept going. It was past 10:30 when the knock came. She wasn't expecting anyone. She never had visitors at this hour. She went to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw a man she had never seen in her life. Well-dressed, not flashy, precise. Dark coat, very still posture, the kind of stillness that comes from training rather than temperament. Mid-40s, clean hands. He was simply standing in her hallway, making no attempt to knock a second time, seemingly content to wait as long as required. Who is it? She called through the door. My name is Enzo, he said. Calm, low, unhurried. I work for someone who wants to thank you. Thank me for what? For something you did last Friday night, outside a restaurant on Haverford Avenue. Clara's hand went still on the deadbolt. I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Mendez, no irritation in his voice, no pressure, just patience, the disciplined kind. I'm not here to cause you any trouble. My employer asked me to deliver something and extend an invitation. That's all. You can refuse the invitation. I won't argue. A beat. But I think you should hear it first. She stood at the door for 15 full seconds. Then she unlocked it. Moet. He was exactly as composed in person as he'd sounded through the door. He stood just inside the entryway, without looking around, without shifting his weight, without doing any of the things people normally do in a stranger's space. He was waiting, just waiting. He held out an envelope. What's that? Clara said. $12,000. Cash. A gesture of gratitude from my employer. Clara looked at the envelope. She looked at his face. For giving a woman soup, she said. For treating his aunt like a human being when she was at her lowest, Enzo said. Mara is the aunt of the man I work for. That landed differently than she expected. She let herself absorb it. Who is he? She said. His name is Luca DeSantis. The name didn't register. It should have. She'd learn that later. She'd understand later why every person in certain rooms of this city went quiet when that name appeared. But right now, it was just a name. A stranger's name attached to an envelope she hadn't asked for. "I don't want the money," she said. Enzo blinked, just once. It was the first crack in his composure, and it was tiny, but she caught it. "I'm sorry. I said I don't want the money." She kept her voice steady. "What I want is a job. I had one 6 days ago, and I don't have it anymore. And the man who took it from me is making sure I can't get another one. That is what I need. Can your employer help with that?" Enzo looked at her for a moment, really looked the way she'd looked at Marcus on her last night, the kind of look that's actually an assessment. "The invitation," he said, recalibrating, "is for you to meet with Mr. DeSantis tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small card. Address only, no name, no logo, no number. He wanted to thank you in person, but given what you've just told me, a slight pause, I think the conversation may go in a different direction than he planned." "What kind of man," Clara said slowly, "sends someone to a stranger's apartment at 11 at night?" "The careful kind," Enzo said simply. He set the envelope and the card on her kitchen counter. He nodded once, not theatrical, not deferential, just final, and let himself out. Clara stood in her kitchen. She looked at the envelope. She looked at the card. She thought about 14 unanswered applications. She thought about Marcus picking up his pen. She thought about Destiny's voice going careful and precise on the phone, trying not to sound scared, and how much it had cost her daughter to hold that together. She thought about Mara's hands, how cold they were, how the woman had said, "I don't want your pity," with that roughed-up, unbroken pride, and how Clara had said, "This isn't pity, it's just extra," and meant it, had meant every syllable of it. She picked up the card. She read the address. She set it down. She left the envelope untouched. She wasn't ready to touch it, not yet, not tonight, because touching it meant deciding something, and she needed to sleep first, needed to wake up and see if tomorrow morning felt like a door or a trap. But she already knew in the place inside her where decisions live before you've consciously made them, that she was going to be at that address at 9 o'clock. She was going to walk in as herself, as Clara Mendez, as the woman who gave a stranger soup and bread and didn't flinch when it cost her everything, as the woman Marcus Hale thought he'd neutralize with a reference call and a 2-week severance check. That woman was going to walk through Luca DeSantis' door tomorrow morning, and neither of them, not Clara, not Luca, had any idea yet what that meeting was actually going to set in motion. She was 7 minutes early. Clara stood outside the address on the card and breathed through the cold air and told herself one more time that she could still leave. She could turn around, get back on the bus, go home, and keep sending applications into the void and figure it out the hard way like she always had. She could do that. That was still an option. She went in anyway. The building was not what she'd expected. No guards at the door, no velvet rope, no tinted glass, no visible markers of power or danger. It was a modest office building on the west side, the kind that housed accountants and small law firms and insurance brokers. The lobby was ordinary. The elevator was ordinary. The hallway on the 4th floor was so ordinary, it was almost disorienting. "Room 408. She knocked. "Come in," said a voice. "I don't come." Luca DeSantis was not what she'd expected either. She didn't know what she'd expected exactly, something harder maybe, something that announced itself. What she got was a man in his early 50s sitting behind a plain desk with a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow and a pair of reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Dark hair going silver at the temples. A face that had been handsome once and had matured into something more interesting than handsome, the kind of face that had processed a significant amount of life and was still standing. He stood when she entered. That surprised her. "Ms. Mendez," he said, coming around the desk with his hand extended. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. DeSantis," she said and shook it. His grip was firm without being performative. He gestured to the chair across from the desk. She sat. He sat. Enzo was in the corner of the room, hands folded, invisible in the way only people who have practiced invisibility can manage. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Luca said, "My aunt told me what you did." "I gave her something to eat," Clara said. "It wasn't a big thing." "It was a very big thing," he said, quietly. No argument in it, just the flat weight of someone stating what they know to be true. Mara she has had a very difficult several years. She doesn't accept help easily. She didn't used to need to. He paused and something moved across his face that he didn't quite suppress. For her to tell me about you, to say your name, to ask me to find you, that alone tells me what that moment meant to her. Clara looked at him carefully. How is she warm, he said. The word came out almost like something was attached to it. She's somewhere warm now. Clara nodded. She let that sit for a moment. The money, she began. You didn't touch it, Luca said. It wasn't a question. She glanced at Enzo involuntarily, who remained perfectly still. No, she said. I didn't. Why not? She thought about how to say it. Because I didn't do what I did for a reward, and I don't want to turn it into one after the fact. It changes what it was. Luca looked at her for a long moment. The kind of long moment that isn't uncomfortable, the kind that means someone is actually thinking rather than just waiting for their turn to speak. Enzo told me what you said last night, he said finally, about the rum. Yes. Tell me yourself, what happened? So she told him. She kept it straight. No performance, no self-pity. Marcus, the dinner service, the bread and soup, the office, the 2 words, the 14 applications, Donna's phone call about the reference calls. She laid it out like a set of facts, which is what it was. When she finished, Luca hadn't moved. He's actively blocking you, he said. That's my understanding. For how long? As long as he decides to, I imagine. Luca turned his coffee cup a quarter turn, didn't drink from it, just moved it. She got the impression it was something he did when he was processing something he didn't like. I know Marcus Hale, he said. That stopped her. You do. Not personally, by reputation. He's been a fixture in that neighborhood for 15 years. He's the kind of man who confuses refinement with goodness. He said it without heat, which somehow made it land harder. He's not a good man. No, Clara agreed. He's not. I'd like to offer you something, Luca said. He leaned forward, slightly elbows on the desk, hands clasped. Not charity, not a gesture of gratitude that you'd feel obligated to refuse. An actual offer with terms that you can evaluate and accept or decline as you see fit. Clara kept her face still. I'm listening. So he talked for 20 minutes. What Luca DeSantis described was not a restaurant job. It wasn't a catering position or a hotel kitchen or any of the 14 things she'd applied for. What he described was a food distribution network, a citywide operation that sourced meals from restaurant overstock and catering surplus and delivered them to shelters, halfway houses, and transitional housing programs. It had been running for 3 years under a coordinator who was leaving to move out of state. It needed someone who understood food, who understood service, who understood, in his words, the difference between feeding someone and caring for someone. I've been looking for the right person for 4 months, he said. The salary is $68,000 a year. There's a vehicle and a phone, the work is hard and the hours are irregular, and some days you'll be making 17 calls before 9 in the morning. Clara stared at him. Why me, she said, not skeptically, genuinely. You don't know me. I know what you did for Mara. That's not a resume. No, he agreed, but it's a character reference, and in my experience, character is the thing you can't train. He paused. The logistics, the coordination, the food industry, knowledge, those things you already have. I've done some reading on you, Ms. Mendez. 6 years at Rosario's, which is not an easy operation. Before that, 3 years at a catering company, where you were promoted to floor supervisor at 28. You know how food moves. You know how to manage people and pressure. You did reading on me. I like to understand what I'm walking into. She sat with that. It should have felt intrusive. It felt somehow like the first time in a week that someone had taken her seriously. You said there are terms, she said. What are the terms? 3 months trial. After that, a full contract with benefits. You report to me directly, but operationally, you run the network yourself. Your decisions, your relationships with the partner, organizations, your schedule. He paused. One condition. What condition? You never compromise the mission for convenience. If a shelter calls at 2 in the morning because a delivery fell through, you handle it. The people this network serves don't have the luxury of waiting until morning. Clara looked at him steadily. That's not a condition, she said. That's just the job. Something shifted in Luca DeSantis's face. Not a smile, something quieter than a smile. Recognition. Yes, he said. It is. Right. She asked for 48 hours to think about it. She didn't need 48 hours, she knew that. The decision was already made in the place where decisions live. But she needed to be the kind of person who thought it through anyway, who didn't let urgency override judgment, who didn't let desperation make her careless. She had spent 43 years making decisions carefully, and she wasn't going to stop now just because a man she'd met 40 minutes ago was offering her a lifeline. 48 hours, Luca said without hesitation. Take my number. He slid a card across the desk. This one had a phone number on it. She stood. He stood. They shook hands again. She was at the door when he said, Ms. Mendez. She turned. The envelope Enzo left, he said, keep it. Not as payment for what you did, as a cushion while you decide. You shouldn't have to make a major life decision while you're worried about rent. Clara considered him. You just told me you don't know me. I know enough, he said. She left without answering. She called Donna from the bus. I need you to tell me everything you know about a man named Luca DeSantis, Clara said. Oh, silence. 3 full seconds of it. Clara, Donna's voice had dropped to a register Clara hadn't heard from her before. Not frightened, careful. The way you get careful when you're near something that requires it. Where did you hear that name? I met with him this morning. Another silence. Longer. You met with him. He offered me Clara listened to me very carefully. Donna was whispering now, which told Clara she was still at work and didn't want to be overheard saying whatever she was about to say. Luca DeSantis he's not just a businessman. You understand what I'm telling you. Clara kept her voice level. Tell me clearly. His family, the DeSantis family, they've been in this city for 40 years. They run things, not legally, not all of it. A breath. He's been cleaner than his father was. People say he's been trying to pull back from the old operations. But Clara, he is who he is. That's not something that just goes away because a man decides he'd rather fund food banks. Clara sat with the phone pressed against her ear and watched the city slide past the bus window. Did he threaten you? Donna asked. Did he make the offer feel like you couldn't say no? No, Clara said honestly. He was actually very straightforward. He told me I could refuse. People like that always say you can refuse, Donna said. That doesn't always mean what it sounds like it means. Donna, I'm serious. I know you are. Clara took a breath. I'll be careful. You'd better be more than careful. She hung up and sat very still for the rest of the ride home. Donna's words doing what words do when they land in fertile soil, spreading, branching, reaching into places you hadn't examined yet. She called her daughter that evening. She didn't tell Destiny about Luca DeSantis, not yet. Instead, she asked how classes were going, listened to a story about a statistics professor who apparently took personal offense when students asked questions, laughed in the right places, said the right things. She was good at being present, even when her mind was somewhere else. She'd had years of practice. After she hung up, she opened her laptop and spent 3 hours researching Luca DeSantis. What she found was a patchwork. There were legitimate business registrations, several of them, including a logistics company and a real estate holding group. There were charitable organization filings, including one for the food network he'd described, which checked out completely 3 years of operation, clean financials, multiple partner shelter organizations she could independently verify. There were a few old newspaper articles from 15 years back that mentioned the DeSantis family in the context of federal investigations that never resulted in charges. And there was one article 7 years old with a photograph. Luca DeSantis Younger standing outside a courthouse. Beside him, a man identified in the caption as Vincent Rossi, described as a longtime associate of the DeSantis organization. Rossi had a face like a fist and eyes that looked like they were doing math at all times. Clara stared at that photograph for a long time. Then she closed the laptop. She picked up Luca's card. She looked at the phone number. She thought about Mara's hands, about bread in a cloth napkin, about what it felt like to offer someone something with no agenda and have them look at you like you might be the first real thing they'd seen in a very long time. She thought about $68,000 a year and a mission she already believed in before she'd even known it existed. She thought about shelters and halfway houses and the particular kind of need that doesn't wait for business hours. She thought about Marcus Hale picking up his pen. She picked up her phone. She was going to call Luca in the morning. She'd already decided that. But tonight, something else needed to happen first. She scrolled to Donna's number, then stopped. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer it. She answered it. Ms. Mendez. The voice was not Luca's, not Enzo's. It was a voice she didn't recognize, rougher, shorter, carrying something she couldn't name immediately, and then could. Warning. You had a meeting this morning. Clara went very still. Who is this? A friend, the voice said. A friendly piece of advice. Whatever DeSantis offered you, you should decline. Go back to looking for restaurant work. Forget you met him. Forget Mara. Forget, Clara stopped herself, steadied. I don't know who you are, but you don't get to tell me. I'm not telling you, the voice said, and something in the tone flattened in a way that made her skin react before her mind did. I'm advising you, strongly. There's a difference. The line went dead. Clara sat holding the phone, her heart doing something loud and irregular in her chest. She set the phone down on the counter very deliberately, the way you set something down when you want your hands to stop shaking. Then she did something she didn't expect herself to do. She picked up Luca's card. She dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Mendez, he said, and his voice was different at 9 o'clock at night, still composed but without the office layer. More direct. Someone just called me, she said, told me to forget your name, to decline whatever you offered me. A pause, very short, described the voice. She did rough mail the particular flat quality of the warning at the end. Another pause. She heard something move on his end, a chair maybe. Are you at home? Yes. Lock your door if it isn't locked. Don't open it unless you know who's on the other side. His voice hadn't changed pitch, but the speed had shifted more deliberate. I'm going to send someone to your street. Not inside, just outside, precautionary. Who called me Luca? He was quiet for 2 seconds. Someone who doesn't want you working for me. That's not an answer. No, he said. It isn't, and you deserve a real one, but not on the phone. A beat. Can you come in tomorrow earlier than we said? How early? 7. She looked at the locked door. She looked at the card in her hand. She thought about the voice on the phone and what it had felt like, that flat, pressureless certainty of someone who believed they didn't need to raise their voice to make a point. 7, she said. I'll be there. She hung up. She checked the deadbolt. She made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink. She sat at her kitchen table in the silence of her apartment with the envelope of money still untouched on the counter, and thought about the exact moment when a single act of kindness bred super cold sidewalk. A woman named Mara had started pulling the fabric of her life in a direction she hadn't chosen and wasn't sure she could control. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. What she was, she realized sitting there in the quiet, what she actually was beneath the surface of the moment was furious. Furious at the anonymous voice. Furious at the assumption that she could be steered, warned off, managed. Furious on behalf of every shelter and halfway house and transitional program that needed someone showing up at 2 in the morning because a delivery fell through. She thought about Mara saying, I don't want your pity, with that battered, undefeated pride. She thought, I don't either. She went to bed. She set her alarm for 5:30. She was going to be early. She was at the building by 6:53. The lobby was empty at that hour except for a security guard who looked at her with the mild curiosity of someone who'd seen stranger things and waved her through when she gave her name. The elevator opened on the 4th floor, and she walked the hallway and knocked on room 408, and Luca DeSantis opened the door himself, this time. No Enzo, no intermediary. Just the man in a dark sweater with the reading glasses still pushed up on his forehead, and a second cup of coffee already waiting on the desk across from his. She noticed the second cup before she noticed anything else. He'd known she'd come, had known before she'd even set her alarm. That told her something. Sit down, he said, not unkindly, like a man who had a great deal to say and wanted to get to it. She sat. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup because the morning was cold and because it gave her something to do while she waited for the truth she'd come for. The man who called you, Luca said, settling into his chair. His name is Vincent Rossi. Clara held the name in her mind for a second. Then it connected the photograph, the courthouse steps, the face like a fist. I've seen his name, she said. I did some reading last night. Luca looked at her steadily. Then you already know what I'm about to tell you. I know what a 7-year-old newspaper article says. I'd rather hear it from you. He put his coffee down, squared his hands on the desk in a way that looked like someone preparing to carry weight. My family has history in this city, he said. Not clean history. My father built something that made money and created loyalty and caused harm in roughly that order. When he died, I inherited the structure of it. Not by choice, by birth order and circumstance. He paused. I have spent the last 11 years trying to dismantle the parts that cause harm and preserve the parts that don't. That is not a quick process. It is not a linear one. And there are people who have a significant financial interest in things staying the way they were. Like Vincent Rossi, Clara said. Rossi ran the operations under my father for 20 years. When I began pulling back, shutting down certain revenue streams, cutting certain relationships, he did not take it quietly. Luca's voice was even, measured, but she could hear what was underneath it, the way you hear a current beneath still water. He has his own people now, his own structure. He considers himself the rightful heir to what my father built, and he considers me an obstacle. And me, Clara said. Why does he care about me? Because you're associated with me now. And because Rossi has a very simple operating philosophy, anything that matters to me is a pressure point. He looked at her directly. I am sorry. You were pulled into something you had no reason to expect. That's not an apology, Clara said. That's an explanation. He nodded slowly. You're right, it isn't. A beat. I'm sorry, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her first name. She registered it without commenting on it. Is he dangerous? She asked. Luca looked at her for one moment too long before he answered. And that moment was its own kind of answer. Yes, he said, he is. To me specifically. At this point, possibly. If you walk away from this job, probably not. You'd become irrelevant to him. He said it without flinching from the implications. But I want to be honest with you. If you take this position, you are not invisible anymore. You'd be working under my name. That comes with protection, but it also comes with exposure. Clara looked at the coffee cup. She thought about the flat, certain voice on the phone last night. The way it had said, forget Mara, like Mara was a word rather than a person. Like the woman with the plastic-wrapped hands standing in the cold was just a variable in an equation. What kind of protection, she said. Enzo or someone like him when the situation calls for it. A phone you can reach me on at any hour. A network of people who know who you are and why you matter. He paused. I don't put people in danger casually, Ms. Mendez. I want that to be clear. Clara, she said. He looked at her. You called me Clara a minute ago, she said. That's fine. You can keep doing that. Something moved across his face again. That thing that wasn't quite a smile but was in the same neighborhood. Clara, he said, what's your answer? She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about everything Donna had said. She thought about what she'd found online. She thought about the legitimate charitable filings in the 3 years of clean food network operations, in the photograph on the courthouse steps, in the man sitting across from her right now, who had stood up when she entered the room and had a second coffee waiting and told her the hard truth when he could easily have kept it comfortable. I'll take the job, she said, but I have conditions of my own. He opened his hands in a gesture that meant, go ahead. I run the network my way. No interference in how I manage relationships with the shelters and partner organizations. If I think a decision is wrong, I say so directly to you and you actually listen. Agreed. If I ever see the Food Network being used as cover for anything else, anything that doesn't serve the people it's supposed to serve, I walk. No negotiation, no severance conversation. Agreed. And Marcus Hale, she said, I don't want you to do anything to Marcus Hale. That one landed differently. She saw it in the slight shift of his posture. Clara, I mean it. Whatever you might be thinking, no, he's a small, petty man, and he'll be exactly that for the rest of his life, and that's enough. I don't want his name attached to my new beginning. Luca looked at her for a long moment. That's a generous position for a woman he tried to bury. It's not generous, she said. It's practical. The second I let him take up space in how I move forward, he wins something he doesn't deserve. Luca picked up his coffee, drank from it for the first time since she'd sat down. All right, he said, Marcus Hale is none of my business. Good. She stood up and extended her hand. When do I start? Monday, he said, shaking it. Enzo will bring the paperwork this afternoon. She was almost to the door when it opened from the other side. She stepped back instinctively. The man who came through the door was not Enzo. He was broader than Enzo, older, with the kind of face she'd only seen in a 7-year-old photograph until right now. He stopped when he saw her. His eyes, dark, calculating, doing that constant math she'd noticed even in print, moved from her face to Luca's and back. Vincent, Luca said. His voice had changed entirely. Still controlled, but tighter, like a hand closing around something. Luca, Rossi said pleasantly. Too pleasantly. I didn't know you had company. Ms. Mendez was just leaving. Rossi looked at her with an expression that was technically a smile. Ms. Mendez, he said. The woman from the restaurant. Clara met his eyes and kept her face completely still. That's me. Generous woman, he said, feeding strangers in the cold. That's a rare quality. The smile didn't move. You should be careful with rare qualities. People take advantage of them. I'll keep that in mind, Clara said. She walked past him. She did not let herself hurry. She made it to the elevator, pressed the button, stood in the hallway, and breathed slow and even while she waited because she would not let him hear her heart from the other side of a closed door. The elevator opened. She stepped in. As the doors closed, she heard Rossi's voice through the door of room 408, no longer pleasant at all. What are you doing, Luca? The doors shut. She exhaled. Her hands, she noticed, were entirely steady. She was more surprised by that than she expected to be. Enzo came to her apartment at 3 that afternoon with the manila folder and the specific energy of a man who had something to say and was deciding whether to say it. He said it. You saw Rossi this morning, he said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table with the folder between them. He walked in on the meeting. He didn't walk in, Enzo said. He doesn't walk in on things. He times things. Clara looked at him. He knew I was there. He has someone in the building, has had for about 8 months. Enzo's jaw was tight. He wanted to see you. He wanted to make an assessment of whether I'm a threat, of whether you're leverage. The word landed in the room and sat there. Explain that, Clara said. Enzo folded his hands on the table. Rossi's way of managing Luca, of keeping pressure on him, has always been through the people around him. Not direct confrontation, indirect. He paused. His Aunt Mara was not on the street by accident, Ms. Mendez. Clara went very still. What? She had an apartment, a safe one paid for through Luca's accounts. 3 months ago it was gone, the lease was interfered with, the management company received certain information that made them unwilling to continue. Her bank account had irregularities that froze her access. His voice was flat and even, but there was something behind it that wasn't flat at all. She was on the street for 11 days before you found her. Luca didn't know for the first 6 of those days because Rossi had also interfered with her phone. Clara sat back in her chair slowly. Rossi put Mara on the street, she said, to send Luca a message, to show him how close Rossi can get. And I walked into the middle of it. You walked into the end of it, Enzo said. You're the reason Luca found out where she was. She told him your name and the restaurant, and he had us find you within 2 hours. A pause, Upain. You didn't just feed his Aunt Ms. Mendez. You were the first person to treat her like a human being in 11 days in a situation specifically designed to isolate and dehumanize her. That's what Luca can't get past. That's why this isn't charity. Clara looked at the folder on the table. She thought about Mara's hands, about the plastic bags. 11 days. Someone had engineered 11 days of that deliberately as a message to someone else. Had looked at an elderly woman and decided she was a useful instrument of pressure. She felt something harden in her chest. Not anger, something colder than anger. Sign the paperwork, she said. Enzo blinked. Sorry. Open the folder. Let's go through it so I can sign it today. He opened it. They went through it. She read every page, asked 3 questions, made one amendment to the language around operational autonomy, and signed her name in ink so deliberate it looked almost aggressive. Monday, she said, handing the folder back. Monday, Enzo confirmed. He stood. Then, Miss Mendez, be aware that Rossi's assessment this morning was not the end. It was the beginning of one. I know, she said. Do you understand what that means practically? It means he's going to probe. He's going to look for a weakness or a pressure point, and he's going to use whatever he finds. She met his eyes. He's going to be disappointed. Enzo looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded once and let himself out. See him. The first Monday was the baptism. She arrived at the network's operations office, a working space attached to a warehouse on the south side at 7 in the morning, and found 3 phone messages, waiting 2 delivery disputes, and a shelter coordinator named Patricia, who had apparently been managing the entire operation alone for 6 weeks and was at the specific edge of burnout that looks from the outside exactly like fury. You the new person, Patricia said, not looking up from her clipboard. Clara Mendez. Yes. Can you drive a 14-foot box truck? I can learn in about 20 minutes. Patricia looked up. She was 60-something, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen decades of institutional failure and were not easily impressed. She looked at Clara the way Luca had looked at her, the real assessment look, not the polite one. Good answer, Patricia said and handed her the clipboard. We've got 3 stops and a timing conflict, and I need you to tell me how to fix it. Clara looked at the clipboard. She looked at the 3 stops, the delivery windows, the vehicle availability, the manpower listed. She did the math in her head, the way she'd done kitchen math for 6 years. Swap stops 2 and 3, she said. Start from the furthest point and work back toward the warehouse. You lose 8 minutes on the route, but you fix the timing conflict entirely, and the truck's back before the afternoon pickup. Patricia stared at her. You've done logistics before. Restaurant service, same math, different product. Patricia said, which Clara would come to understand was Patricia's version of high praise. They worked through the morning with the efficiency of 2 people who don't waste words. By noon, Clara had handled the delivery disputes, established contact with 4 of the 12 partner shelter coordinators, and driven 2/3 of the route herself while Patricia navigated. By 2 in the afternoon, she knew the names of the regular drivers, understood the core bottlenecks in the system, and had identified 3 small changes that would save approximately 4 hours of combined labor per week. She was on the phone with the 3rd shelter coordinator, a man named Gerald, who ran a halfway house on the east side and had strong opinions about delivery windows, when her cell phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She finished the conversation with Gerald, promised to call back before 5, and checked the message. It was a photograph. Her daughter, walking across the campus of her university backpack over one shoulder, laughing at something on her phone. Taken from a distance. Candid. Clearly taken without Destiny's knowledge. No caption, no text, just the photograph. Clara sat absolutely still for the length of time it takes to understand something fully and let yourself feel the weight of it. Then she called Luca. He picked up on the first ring. Someone sent me a photograph of my daughter, she said, taken without her knowledge. She heard the shift on his end, sharp and immediate. Send it to me, right now. She forwarded the image. Clara, listened to me. His voice was different than she'd heard it. Not louder, more direct. The professional composure was still there, but underneath it was something that moved quickly. I'm going to handle this. I need you to call Destiny. Don't tell her everything. Tell her there's been a security concern and she needs to be aware of her surroundings. Tell her not to go anywhere alone for the next few days. She'll ask questions. Yes, answer as many as you can. She deserves to know she's being protected, even if she doesn't know all the reasons why. Luca, she kept her voice level by sheer will. Tell me right now, is my daughter in actual danger? A pause, short but real. This is Rossi showing you he can reach people you love. It's almost certainly a scare tactic. Almost certainly. I will not lie to you. There is a small percentage in which it is more than that. I am going to make sure it stays a scare tactic, but I need 20 minutes. You have 10, Clara said. She hung up and called Destiny. The conversation with her daughter was the hardest thing she'd done in a week full of hard things. Destiny was sharp. She'd always been sharp, Clara had raised her that way on purpose because the world didn't give soft landings to women who weren't paying attention. And sharp meant that the careful, calibrated version of the truth Clara tried to offer her lasted approximately 90 seconds before Destiny's questions outpaced the scaffolding around them. Mom, what is actually going on? I took a new job. The situation is more complicated than a normal job. How complicated? Complicated enough that I'm asking you to be careful for a few days. Mom. Destiny. Are you in danger? Clara closed her eyes for 1 second. I am being looked after. I need you to be looked after too. Can you do that for me? Can you just be aware? Stay with people you trust. Call me every evening. A silence on the line. The kind her daughter used when she was deciding how much to push. Every evening, Destiny said finally. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. Mom. Yeah, baby. You have better not be doing anything that gets you hurt. I'm not planning on it. Plans aren't the same as outcomes. No, Clara said quietly. They're not. She hung up and sat with the phone in both hands and let herself feel it, the full, fierce, frightening weight of being a mother in a situation you didn't choose, with a child who trusted you in a world that was less safe than you'd promised. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went back to work, because the shelters were still waiting, because Gerald still needed a call back before 5. Because 14 delivery routes weren't going to optimize themselves, and Mara was somewhere warm now, and Clara was the reason, and then there were hundreds of other people out there who needed what Mara had needed, and the only person standing between the need and the solution right now was her. She called Gerald at 4:47. At 6:15, Luca called her back. Rossi has been reminded he said that certain actions have consequences he is not currently positioned to absorb. What does that mean? It means the photograph was a test, and he has been informed that the test failed. A beat. Destiny is safe. I have 2 people on her campus as of an hour ago. Discreet. She won't see them. How long until I say otherwise? Clara exhaled. She did it quietly away from the phone. Thank you. Clara, his voice dropped slightly. I want you to understand something. What Rossi did today, using your daughter, that crossed a line that even his own people have limits around. He is more isolated than he was this morning. Is that good or bad for us? Isolated men make desperate decisions, Luca said. So it is both. She absorbed that. You think he'll escalate. I think, Luca said carefully, that we should be ready for the possibility. And I think you should know that when that happens, and I'm not saying it will, I'm saying if you are not going to be facing it alone. She sat at the desk in the operations office with the day's paperwork half finished and Patricia's handwritten notes stacked at her elbow and the sound of the warehouse being locked up for the night in the background. And she thought about all of the ways this week had been nothing she'd planned for and everything she apparently was. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. 8 o'clock, Luca said. We need to talk strategy. She was about to hang up when something made her say it. She didn't plan it. It came from the same place her decisions always came from before she consciously made them. Luca, Rossi isn't going to stop. No, he said, he isn't. So at some point we stop waiting for him to make the next move. Silence, then get some sleep, Clara. She locked up the office. She walked to her car, the network vehicle, a clean white sedan that she was still getting used to having. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. She thought about a woman named Mara and a cloth napkin and the word pity and how she'd refused it with everything she had. She thought about Rossi's face in the doorway of room 408 doing his constant math. She thought about the photograph of her daughter laughing on a campus sidewalk taken from a distance, meant to make her feel small and afraid and manageable. She started the car. She was none of those things. And somewhere in the city tonight, Vincent Rossi was about to find that out in a way that would be impossible to mistake. She was at the building at 7:58. Luca was already there standing rather than sitting, which told her the night had not been restful. Enzo was in his corner. There was a third man she hadn't seen before, younger, with a laptop open on the side table and the focused stillness of someone who works in information rather than confrontation. This is Ray, Luca said. He handles intelligence for us. Clara nodded at Ray. Ray nodded back without ceremony. She liked him immediately. Talk to me, she said and sat down. Luca didn't ease into it. Rossi moved money last night. 3 transfers offshore accounts, nothing traceable on the surface, but Ray flagged the pattern. He looked at Ray. He's liquidating, Ray said, turning the laptop to face her. Not everything, not in a way that looks like flight. More like someone consolidating resources before a specific action. What kind of action? Clara said. Ray glanced at Luca. Luca gave a slight nod. The kind that's meant to be final, Ray said. The room was quiet for a moment with the weight of that. He's done calculating, Clara said. He's decided. That's our read, Luca said. The photograph of destiny was supposed to make you pull back. You didn't pull back. You signed in the contract. You showed up Monday. You ran the routes. You called Gerald before 5. The smallest pause. He has people who watch things. So me not flinching made it worse. It changed his math, Luca said. You became a variable he can't account for. And Rossi does not tolerate variables. Clara thought about the flat certainty in that phone voice. Advising you, strongly. The way it had assumed that certainty was enough. That being named as a pressure point was sufficient to produce the desired behavior. What does he want ultimately? She said. Not tactically, ultimately. Control of what my father built, Luca said. The legitimate operations as cover the old networks underneath the whole structure restored to what it was 15 years ago. He sat down now, and for the first time since she'd met him, she could see the fatigue in his face, not weakness, but the specific weariness of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time. He wants me either removed or compliant. He's tried compliant, so now we're at removed. And I'm in the way because I work for you. You're in the way because you didn't scare, Luca said. That's rarer than you'd think, and it's threatening to him in a way that's almost philosophical. Clara looked at him. Almost philosophical, she repeated. Rossi's entire operating model depends on the assumption that everyone has a threshold. Find the right pressure point and apply sufficient force, and people behave the way you need them to behave. He met her eyes. You found out he could reach your daughter, and you called me, signed the contract, and went back to work. What was I supposed to do? Disappear? Most people would at least hesitate. I hesitated, she said, in the car for about 90 seconds. Then I decided that was enough hesitation. Ray made a sound that might in a different register have been a laugh. Luca looked at her for a moment. We need to move before he does, he said, and I need to know if you're willing to be part of that. Define part of that. There's a meeting tonight, Rossi, 3 of his senior people, a location Ray has pinpointed. He paused. I intend to be there, not with violence, with documentation. Ray has been building a financial record for 14 months. What we have presented to the right federal contact at the right moment ends Rossi's operation cleanly and legally. Then why haven't you done it already? Clara said. Because the federal contact needs the meeting location confirmed in real time, and Rossi changes his locations on 2-hour notice. Luca's voice stayed even. We have a source inside his operation. But the source won't communicate with me or Enzo. He's too afraid of being identified on our end. He'll only communicate through a clean channel. Someone Rossi doesn't have a file on. Clara understood before he finished the sentence. She sat with it for exactly 3 seconds. You need me to be the clean channel, she said. I need you to receive 1 text message from a number that Rossi cannot connect to my organization. Read it, tell me what it says, and do nothing else. He paused. That's all. You're not in the building. You're not at the meeting. You're not visible. That's all, she said. That's everything, he corrected quietly. She looked at Enzo, who was watching her with the specific expression of a man who has already run this scenario multiple times and knows which variables he can control and which he can't. She looked at Ray, who was looking at the laptop with the focused neutrality of someone who has learned to let other people make the decisions that aren't his to make. She thought about Mara's hands. She thought about destiny on a sidewalk photographed without her knowledge by a man who saw people as instruments. She thought about Rossi in the doorway of this room, doing his math, deciding she was leverage. Send the number to my phone, she said. I'll keep it on me all day. The day moved strangely after that. She went to the warehouse, ran the morning dispatch, solved a refrigeration problem with the Northside delivery vehicle by calling a mechanic she knew from her catering days and talking him through a workaround over the phone. She had lunch with Patricia, which consisted of bad coffee and a debate about optimal shelter delivery sequencing that Clara realized somewhere in the middle of it was the most normal she'd felt in 2 weeks. "You're good at this," Patricia said around 2 in the afternoon in the tone of someone issuing a verdict they deliberated on. "I had good training," Clara said. "Restaurant. 6 years." Patricia made a sound. "Hard school." "Best I could afford," Clara said. Patricia looked at her for a moment with those decades-deep eyes. "You know what I've noticed about you in a week. Tell me." "You don't explain yourself. Most new people, they justify every decision. They want you to understand their reasoning. They need you to agree before they move." Patricia drank her bad coffee with the equanimity of someone who had given up expecting it to improve. "You just decide and move. You explain after, if someone asks." "Is that a problem?" "It's a relief," Patricia said. "Do you know how exhausting it is to work with people who need permission to trust themselves?" Clara smiled at that, actually smiled. "I've been one of those people," she said. "I got less patient with it." Her phone buzzed at 4:41. Unknown number. One line of text, Pier Warehouse South Dock. 9 p.m. She read it twice. Put the phone in her pocket. Finished her conversation with Patricia about the Thursday routing adjustments. Then walked to the back of the warehouse and called Luca. "Pier Warehouse," she said when he picked up. "South Dock, 9 tonight." She heard him exhale, not relief exactly, more like a man who has been holding a structure together by hand for 14 months and just felt the first bolt lock into place. "Thank you," he said. "Is that it? Am I done?" "You're done," he said. "Go home after work. Lock the door. Keep Enzo's number in your recent calls." Luca. "Yes. Be careful tonight." A pause. "That's my line," he said. She went back to work. She stayed until 6, finished the day's paperwork, helped Patricia lock up. She drove home in the white sedan through rush hour traffic with the radio on and her hands steady on the wheel, in the particular quality of silence that comes before something large either happens or doesn't. She was home by 6:30. She made dinner. She called Destiny at 7, exactly as promised, and listened to a story about the statistics professor that had apparently developed new dimensions since their last conversation. She laughed in the right places. She said goodnight and meant it. At 8:45, her phone rang. Not Luca's number, not Enzo's, not Ray's, a number she'd never seen. She answered. "Miss Mendez." A voice she recognized immediately and felt in her stomach before she consciously processed it. Rossi. Not the phone voice from before. In person now or close to it, fuller, more deliberate, no longer even performing pleasantness. "You had a busy day." Clara sat down. She did not let the sitting look like anything other than a choice. "Mr. Rossi, you've been running food routes. Very admirable." A pause with something specific in it, not silence, but preparation. "And you made a phone call this afternoon from the back of the warehouse." Her blood went cold. She kept her voice entirely even. "I make a lot of phone calls. It's a logistics operation." He said. "This one was to Luca, 15 seconds long." Another pause. "Short call, Ms. Mendez. What can you say in 15 seconds? "Not much," she said. "That's why I keep my calls short." "I like you," Rossi said, and the way he said it was the least likable thing she'd ever heard. "I told Luca that from the beginning, actually, when I heard about you. I said, this is a woman with spine. This is not someone you use as a messenger." "Then you should have nothing to worry about," she said. "I worry about intelligent people who've attached themselves to losing causes," Rossi said. "Luca's cause is lost, Ms. Mendez. It was lost before you arrived. I'd like you to understand that clearly." The pleasantness evaporated completely. "I'd like you to understand it tonight, specifically." "Are you threatening me?" she said. "I'm giving you a window," he said. "A small one. It closes at 9 o'clock. He hung up. Clara stared at the phone. 9 o'clock. The exact time of the peer meeting. He knew. He knew about the meeting. He knew about her call. He knew something had moved today, and he was telling her he knew, which meant the source inside his operation was either compromised or was never what Luca thought it was. She called Luca, straight to voicemail. She called Enzo, 4 rings voicemail. She called Ray. "Ray," she said the second he picked up, "Rossi just called me. He knows about the pier. Your source is burned." a sharp intake of breath. How long ago? Wait, 3 minutes. Ada, I can't reach Luca. He and Enzo left 40 minutes ago for position. She heard rapid typing. The federal contact is already moving toward the location. If Rossi knows, he either changes location or he turns it into something else, Clara said. Yes. Can you warn the federal contact? I'm trying. He's in a comms blackout window protocol. More typing. Miss Mendez, I need you to listen to me. Stay where you are. Do not. What's the address of the pier? She said. No, Ray, absolutely not. If Luca walks into a situation where Rossi has repositioned and the federal contact is in a blackout and nobody has flagged the change, you are not. I am not asking for your permission, she said. I am asking for the address. Silence, 4 full seconds of it. If you go there, Ray said, you stay in the car, you do not get out. You call me the second you arrive. Address Ray. He gave it to her. She drove faster than she should have. She knew that and did it anyway because the math was simple and there was only one answer to it. Luca was walking into a meeting that was no longer what he thought it was with no warning, and she was the only person who currently knew that. She got to the pier district at 8:51. She parked where she could see the south dock without being on it exactly as Ray had said, and she called him. I'm here, she said. Do you see anything? She looked. There were vehicles near the south dock, 3 of them dark, the kind of nondescript that is its own kind of conspicuous if you know how to look. 3 vehicles, she said. South side. That's not Luca's setup. His approach is from the north. Those aren't his people. No, Ray said, and his voice had shifted into something tight and fast. That's Rossi's people repositioned, which means Luca is going to arrive from the north and walk directly into Pau. She saw headlights from the north access road, coming in slow, the way you come in when you're trying not to announce yourself and don't yet know that the announcement has already been made for you. He's coming in now, she said. Miss Mendez, stay in the car. She got out of the car. She ran toward the north access road, waving both arms into the headlights because there was no other way to make sure he saw her, because standing still and hoping was not something her body was capable of in this moment. The vehicle stopped. The door opened. Luca stepped out, saw her, and his face did something she'd never seen it do. It went from composed to genuinely shocked in the space of a single second. Clara, what? Rossi repositioned, she said, breathing hard from the run. 3 vehicles south dock, your source is burned. The federal contact is in a comms blackout. Luca looked past her toward the south dock. She watched him process it, not slowly, not with visible panic, but with the rapid cold recalibration of someone who has been in dangerous situations before and knows that the first 30 seconds after new information arrives are the most important ones. Get back in your car, he said. Luca. Clara. His hand came down on her shoulder, not roughly, but with the full force of someone making a decision on behalf of someone else for the first and possibly only time. I need you to get back in your car right now. What you just did running in here was the bravest thing and the most dangerous thing, and I cannot handle what needs to happen next if I'm worrying about you. Do you understand that? She looked at him. She looked at Enzo stepping out of the vehicle behind him, already on his phone. She looked at the dark water beyond the dock and the 3 vehicles sitting in it like a held breath. What are you going to do? She said. What I came here to do, Luca said, differently than I planned. That's all. She believed him. She didn't know entirely why she believed him. Maybe it was 6 years of reading people's faces across restaurant tables, knowing the difference between someone performing confidence and someone actually carrying it. He was carrying it. She went back to her car. She sat in the driver's seat with the engine running and the phone in both hands, and she watched. For 8 minutes, nothing visible happened. Then 3 things happened at once. A 4th vehicle arrived from the east, larger, dark federal plates she could barely read at the distance, but Ray confirmed when she described them. The comms blackout had ended. Ray had reached the contact. The 3 dark vehicles near the south dock began to move, pulling back, repositioning in the way you reposition when the equation has suddenly changed and the advantage you had 30 seconds ago no longer exists. And Rossi's voice on the pier, she couldn't hear words, only the shape of it rising and then cutting off, went silent. Her phone rang. Luca. It's over, he said. Rossi is in federal custody. His 3 people are with him. The documentation Ray has been building since last year goes to the prosecutors tonight. A pause. Are you all right? Yes, she said. And then because it was true and seemed important to say out loud, I'm very angry with you for not having a better contingency plan. She heard something from him that she had never once heard in the week she'd known him. A laugh, short reel without any performance in it. That's fair, he said. I'd like to go home now, she said. Enzo will follow you. That's not necessary. It is, he said. Tonight it is. She drove home with Enzo's headlights in her rearview mirror, steady and unhurried. She parked, she went upstairs. She checked the deadbolt and sat down at her kitchen table and looked at the envelope that was still somehow untouched on her counter. She picked it up. She opened it and looked at the money inside, the gesture of gratitude. She hadn't wanted to turn a moment of grace into a transaction. She looked at it for a long time. Then she put it back. Not because she was refusing it anymore, because she knew now exactly what she was going to do with it, and she needed to make one phone call before she did anything else. She called Patricia. It's late, Patricia said, picking up on the third ring with the slightly suspicious tone of someone who is never surprised by inconvenient timing. I know, I'm sorry. Clara looked at the envelope. I want to talk to you about the North Side shelter, the one with the capacity problem, the one with the furnace and the 12 extra beds they can't heat. That one. What would it cost to fix the furnace? Silence. Why? Because I have some money that needs to go somewhere useful, Clara said, and I think I just figured out where. She heard Patricia set something down on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted slightly. Not soft, Patricia wasn't soft, but something had opened up in it. The estimate from October was $9,400. Clara looked at the envelope. $12,000. That left over $2,000 for the supply gaps Patricia had mentioned in passing twice that week, the ones she hadn't actually asked for help with because she'd been managing without help for so long, she'd stopped knowing how to ask. I'll have a check cut by end of week, Clara said. A pause. Clara, Patricia said, yeah, you're a strange person to have landed in this job. I know. I mean that as the highest possible compliment. I know that too, Clara said. She said goodnight. She sat at the table for a while longer. In the quiet of an apartment that smelled like coffee and dish soap and something else now, purpose maybe, or the particular lightness that comes when you stop surviving and start building. She thought about a cold sidewalk and a woman who said, I don't want your pity, in a chain of events so improbable and so costly and so entirely worth it that she couldn't have mapped it in advance if she tried. She thought about what Luca had said, character is the thing you can't train. She thought about Patricia's voice shifting into that not soft openness. She thought about destiny calling every evening at 7 and how she would call tomorrow, and Clara would be able to tell her slowly and carefully and with as much truth as could be given at once that the danger had passed. She was still at the table when her phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Different from Rossi's, different from the source. She opened it. It was a photograph. Mara, standing in what looked like a warm, small apartment, wearing a coat that fit her, holding a cup of something hot in both hands that were no longer wrapped in plastic. Hands that were clean and warm and whole. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking out a window with the expression of someone watching something ordinary, a street, a tree, the ordinary world going about its ordinary business like it was the most remarkable thing she'd ever seen. No message, just the photograph. Clara looked at it for a very long time. Then she set the phone down and pressed both hands flat on the kitchen table and breathed slow and even all the way down to the bottom of her lungs. She had walked out of Rosario's 8 days ago with nothing but a worn apron and $40 and a stubborn belief that being a good person still meant something. She still believed it. The difference was now she had proof. The furnace at the North Side shelter was fixed by Thursday. Clara was there when the crew finished the job, standing in the common room with Patricia and a shelter director named Howard, who had the handshake of a man who had been thanked too rarely and received it with an awkwardness that broke her heart a little. He kept saying, you didn't have to, and she kept saying, I know, and Patricia stood to one side drinking bad coffee from a paper cup and watching the exchange with the expression of someone witnessing something they want to remember accurately. 12 beds, Howard said for the third time. We've had 12 people sleeping in the annex with space heaters and extension cords since October. Not anymore, Clara said. Miss Mendez. Clara. Clara. He stopped, gathered himself. Why? She looked at him. It was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not gracious. He actually wanted to know. Because someone did something for a person I care about, she said, and I decided the way to honor that was to keep it moving. Howard nodded slowly like a man filing something away where he'd be able to find it later. Patricia touched her elbow on the way out. Just once, brief saying nothing. That was enough. The call from Destiny came that evening, not at 7 but at 5:15, which meant something had happened. Mom. Her daughter's voice was different, not the careful, controlled version Clara had been hearing all week. This was the unguarded version, the one that still sounded like a 12-year-old when something mattered enough. The two people who've been on my campus. I saw one of them today. Clara closed her eyes for half a second. Destiny. Don't tell me I wasn't supposed to notice. I notice everything. You raised me to notice everything, and a man has been sitting outside my dining hall every morning for a week. A breath. Tell me what's going on. The real version. I'm 20 years old, Mom. I can handle the real version. Clara sat down. She thought about all the ways to be careful, all the ways to protect. And then she thought about Patricia saying, do you know how exhausting it is to work with people who need permission to trust themselves? And she thought about how she had raised this girl specifically to not need that permission. All right, she said, the real version. She talked for 40 minutes. Not everything there were things Destiny didn't need and things that weren't entirely hers to share. But the shape of it, Mara, the firing, Luca, the network, Rossi, the peer, the federal custody, the photograph of Destiny on the campus sidewalk. She said it all in the straight, factual way she delivered it to Luca in his office 2 weeks ago because her daughter deserved the same respect she'd given a man she'd just met. Destiny was quiet for a long time after she finished. He had someone photograph me, Destiny said finally. Yes. To scare you. Yes. Did it work? For about 90 seconds, Clara said. Another silence. Then, and this was the thing Clara would carry for the rest of her life, her daughter laughed. Not the careful laugh, not the I'm handling this laugh. The real one. The one that meant she'd understood something. And, Mom, Destiny said, you literally took down a mob operation because you gave a woman soup. I didn't take down anything. You ran onto a dark pier in the middle of the night. I stayed well back from the... Mom. What? I'm so proud of you, I don't have words for it. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth for a second. Just a second. Don't make me cry in the parking lot of a shelter, Destiny Marie. Too late, her daughter said, and Clara could hear that it was too late for both of them. The federal case moved faster than cases usually move, which Ray explained was because 14 months of financial documentation tends to make prosecutors feel confident about their mornings. Rossi was charged on 9 counts. His 3 associates faced their own arrays of charges. The source inside Rossi's operation, a man named Callum, who had been living in quiet terror for 2 years, was cooperating fully. Luca called her with updates when there were updates worth having. He didn't call more than necessary, which she appreciated. He had his own lawyers, his own process, his own reckoning, with the legal scrutiny that a federal investigation inevitably casts in all directions, even on the people it isn't targeting. He handled it with the same composure he handled everything, not without cost, but without collapse. 2 weeks after the pier, he asked to meet, not at the office. He named a diner on the west side she knew from years back, the kind of place that had been there since before either of them, with coffee that wasn't good, and portions that were in the specific book anonymity of a room where nobody was performing anything for anyone showing. She was there first. She was always there first. He came in, found her in the booth, sat down across from her without ceremony, and looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Open. Not the composed version, not the professional version, just the man. How are you, he said, and he meant it the full way. I fixed a furnace, she said. I hired a second driver for the Thursday routes. Patricia found a restaurant willing to donate surplus twice a week instead of once. She paused. My lawyers are cautiously optimistic, he said, which means we'll know in 6 months. The coffee came. They drank it without commenting on the quality. I want to expand the network, Clara said. East Side is underserved. 3 shelters out there are working with inconsistent supply because nobody's built a reliable relationship with the distribution sources in that part of the city. How long would it take? 3 months to build the relationships, another 2 to stabilize the routes. She looked at him. I'd need a second vehicle and 1 more coordinator. Done, he said, no hesitation. She looked at him steadily. You don't want to think about it. I've been thinking about it since Monday, he said. I was waiting to see if you'd bring it up or wait for me to. You were testing me. I was observing, he said. There's a difference. Is there? You tell me, he said. She considered him across the table, the silver at his temples, the reading glasses that were perpetually either on his forehead or in his breast pocket, and never in her observation actually on his face when he was reading. The specific quality of stillness he carried that she'd initially read as composure and had since come to understand was something closer to discipline, the practiced containment of a man who had felt a great deal in his life and learned at cost to be careful about what he let out and when. My father built something, Luca said quieter now, and I've spent 11 years trying to decide what to do with what he left me, the harm of it and the parts that weren't harm. He looked at his coffee cup. The network, the food distribution, that was the first thing I built entirely on my own, not from what he left, not using his contacts or his money or his name in the way he used it. He paused, and it nearly failed twice for lack of the right person running it. But it didn't, Clara said, because you walked out of a restaurant on Haverford Avenue on a Friday night with bread and soup. Because Mara was standing in the cold. Because you saw her, he said. A lot of people didn't. Clara looked at him. Tell me how she's doing. His face changed the way it always changed when Mara came up the thing that wasn't quite suppressible, the love that was too old and too deep to fully manage. She's well. She has the apartment, again, different building, more secure. She's been asking about you. I'd like to meet her properly, Clara said, if she'd be willing. She's been asking when, he said. I've been waiting for you to be ready. I've been ready, Clara said. I know, he said. I was being careful. Luca. Yes. You can stop being careful with me. He looked at her for a long moment. Something settled in his face, not down, but into place. The way something settles when it has been held at a careful angle for a long time, and his finally allowed to simply rest. All right, he said. Yeah. She met Mara on a Sunday. Luca drove. He was different in a car, less the contained professional, more the nephew checking his mirrors and his phone, and making small talk that revealed by accident that Mara had opinions about his driving that he had been hearing since he was 16 years old. She's going to like you, he said, turning onto the street. You don't know that. She already does, he said. She just hasn't met you yet. The apartment was small and warm and smelled like something being cooked, something with garlic and herbs that made Clara's restaurant-trained nose identify rosemary within 3 seconds of the door opening. Mara was shorter than Clara had remembered, or maybe she just seemed smaller without the cold and the dark and the weight of 11 days on the street pressing down on her. She opened the door and looked at Clara and said without preamble, "You're the one who called me by my name." Clara felt that in her chest. You told it to me. I know, Mara said, but you used it. You said, Mara, come back tomorrow. Like I was a person with a tomorrow. She studied Clara with the eyes of someone who had been assessed by a great many people in her life and had gotten very good at returning the assessment. Come in. I'm making food and there's too much of it. Luca behind Clara made a sound that was absolutely a laugh he was trying not to show. They ate at Mara's small table, and Mara talked not about the 11 days, not about Rossi, not about the cold sidewalk. She talked about what she'd been before. A school teacher, 40 years. English literature, high school, 3 generations of the same neighborhood. She talked about her students the way you talk about people you genuinely loved and genuinely believed in, with a specificity that meant she remembered names, circumstances, the particular struggles of particular kids. You know what a good teacher and a good restaurant worker have in common, Mara said, at one point looking at Clara over a cup of tea. Tell me. You learn very quickly that your job is not about you. She wrapped both hands around her cup. hands that were warm now, completely warm, and Clara had to look away for a second. The second you make it about you, you lose them. The students, the table, whoever you're serving. That's exactly it, Clara said. Which is why Mara said, what you did outside that restaurant, you weren't performing generosity. You weren't making yourself feel good. You just saw me and responded to what you saw. She paused. I've been a teacher for 40 years. I know the difference. Clara looked at this woman across a small table in a warm apartment and felt something move through her that she didn't have an immediate word for, not gratitude, not pride, not the particular emotion of being seen accurately. All of those things maybe, but braided into something that felt larger than its components. Thank you, Clara said. Mara looked at her sharply. What for? For being there, Clara said. I know that sounds strange, but if you hadn't been standing on that sidewalk, none of this. She gestured a small gesture that meant everything, the warm apartment, the food Luca at the end of the table quietly listening the network, the 12 heated beds at Howard's shelter, Patricia and her clipboard and her not soft voice going open. None of this is something I would have found on my own. Mara was quiet for a moment. None of it finds you, she said finally, unless you're the kind of person it can find. 3 months later, the East Side expansion launched on a Tuesday. It was not a ceremony. Clara didn't believe in ceremonies for things that were supposed to be infrastructure. Infrastructure that needed a ceremony to justify its existence was infrastructure that wasn't sure enough of itself. The East Side roots launched the way she'd launched everything since day one, with a clipboard, a vehicle, a driver who knew the streets, and a phone full of contact numbers. She'd spent 12 weeks building one relationship at a time. The third shelter on the route was run by a woman named Gloria, who had called Clara 14 times during the relationship building phase, with questions ranging from the operational to the deeply personal, who had shown up to 2 of their meetings with food she'd made herself as a gesture of welcome, and who, on the first delivery day, stood at the loading dock with her arms crossed and her chin up in the posture of someone who is trying very hard not to look emotional and failing. You're really here, Gloria said. I told you Tuesday, Clara said. People say Tuesday, Gloria said, and then it's Thursday, and then it's next week, and then it's a voicemail saying the funding fell through. I'm here, Clara said, and I'll be here next Tuesday, and the one after. Gloria uncrossed her arms. I've got 40 people in there, she said, who haven't had a reliable meal source in 3 months. They do now, Clara said. Gloria looked at her for a long time with the specific scrutiny of a woman who has been in the business of human need for long enough to know the difference between promises and people. Then she stepped aside and said, back the truck in. I'll show you where we store. That evening, Clara sat in the operations office after Patricia had gone home and the drivers had returned the vehicles and the warehouse was quiet, and she did the numbers for the week. 42 deliveries, 317 individual meals, 7 partner organizations, 11 if you counted the new East Side additions. 2 new restaurant donors Patricia had recruited with the blunt force of her personality and the moral clarity of her pitch. She looked at those numbers for a long time. Then her phone rang. Luca. How was the launch, he said. Gloria cried, Clara said. She's going to be furious with me for telling you that. I won't repeat it, he said. A pause. Clara. Yes. The federal case. There's a development. She sat up. What kind? The good kind, he said. Rossi took a plea, 9 counts, minimum 12 years. His 3 associates took deals of their own. Another pause, different in quality, carrying something she couldn't name, until she recognized it as relief that had been compressed for a very long time and was only now beginning to decompress. It's done. She sat with that, the word done in a context where it actually meant something. And you, she said, your lawyers, no charges, he said. The cooperation and the documentation made the picture clear enough. She heard him exhale. It's over. Clara pressed her hand flat on the desk, the same gesture as the kitchen table weeks ago, grounding herself in something solid while something large moved through her. Good, she said. And then because it was true and because she'd decided to stop being careful about things that were true, I'm glad you're okay. A beat. So am I, he said, thanks to a woman who ran onto a dark pier waving her arms. I stayed well back from the Clara. What? Thank you, he said, simply, without the professional layer, without the composure layer, without anything between the words and what they meant. She held that for a moment. Don't thank me, she said. Hire me better next time. The laugh again, real unguarded, the one she'd first heard in a car and had been quietly filing away ever since. Noted, he said. She went to see Marcus Hale on a Wednesday. She hadn't planned to. She was driving past Rosario's on a delivery reroute when the impulse hit her, not anger, not revenge, not even the desire to be seen. Something quieter, the need to close a door properly rather than leave it swinging. She went in during the afternoon lull and asked for him at the host stand. The hostess, young, knew someone Clara didn't recognize, went to get him with the slightly nervous expression of someone who doesn't know what's about to happen and doesn't love that. Marcus came out of the back looking exactly as he always had. Pressed, self-contained, carrying the particular authority of a man in his own domain. When he saw Clara, something flickered across his face, a recalibration quick and almost invisible. Clara, he said with the neutrality of someone who hasn't decided yet which direction to play this. Marcus, she said, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to tell you something. He waited. The woman I gave food to, she said. Her name was Mara. She's doing well now. She's warm and she has an apartment and she's been talking to some of her former students online. She kept her voice even. I run a food distribution network now. We're serving 317 people a week across 12 partner organizations and expanding. She paused. I wanted you to know that's where that bowl of soup went. Marcus looked at her. His face was doing something that was difficult to read, not shame, not exactly, but the specific discomfort of a man who has constructed a self-image that is currently being quietly challenged and has no procedural response ready. I hope the restaurant is doing well, she said, and she meant it in the most neutral possible way, not warmth, not bitterness, just the plain statement of a woman who no longer needed his restaurant to be anything in particular. She left before he could answer. She didn't need to hear what he said. She already knew what mattered. The photograph of Mara, the one sent to her phone on the night Rossi was arrested, Mara in her warm apartment with both hands around a cup and her face turned toward the window Clara had it printed. Not large, wallet-sized. She kept it in her jacket pocket, the inside one, the one closest. Not as a reminder of where she'd come from, not as a talisman against hard days. Though there were hard days, there would always be hard days. Late deliveries and funding gaps and the particular grief of need that outpaces supply no matter how fast you move. She kept it because it was true, because it was the truest document she owned of the things she'd needed to prove to herself and had proven without planning to on a cold Friday night outside a restaurant where she no longer worked. That one person paying attention at the right moment could change the entire direction of another person's life. That kindness was not naivety, that it was not weakness, that it was not a soft option for people who couldn't handle the harder truths of how the world worked. It was, in fact, the hardest thing, the thing that cost you the most and required the most courage and was the most persistently, stubbornly powerful force she had ever encountered in 43 years of living in a city that rewarded other qualities. She knew that now in a way she hadn't known it before, not as a belief, as evidence. On a Thursday morning in early spring, Clara Mendez arrived at the warehouse at 6:50, unlocked the operations office, started the coffee, and began mapping the next phase of the East Side expansion, while Patricia's car pulled into the lot while the first driver of the day checked the vehicle manifest, while 17 shelters across the city woke up knowing that Tuesday would come, and the truck would come, and the need would be met. She had walked out of a restaurant with nothing but a belief in a pair of worn-out sneakers. She had given a cold woman something to eat and lost everything. And then she had built something that fed hundreds of people a week, not because a mafia boss had helped her, not because a federal case had cleared the path, not because circumstances had aligned in her favor, but because she had been the kind of person the moment could find. And when it found her standing on a cold sidewalk with bread in her hands and a woman in front of her who needed to be seen, she had not looked away. That was the beginning. That was the whole story, and that was enough.